Welcome to Transformation Heroes by Feedia, a series dedicated to CX professionals.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformation Heroes. Joined once again by François. Hello, François.
Hello, Carlos. Good to be back.
Good to have you. So today we are covering 3 strategies on how to empower operation teams, leading to on-the-ground CX transformation. So the reason we split this up into 3 different strategies is because I think we have 3 core areas to focus on. And it's a really interesting topic just because, it's something that continuously evolves, and as you grow your team or your company, these strategies kind of stick with you and can grow as well. So without further ado, strategy 1 is all about cultivating a customer first culture. So I wondered, François, if you could talk about the importance of cultivating a culture, and also what sort of impact does this have on the success of CX initiatives?
Yeah, well, first of all, there is no CX initiative that is actually if the top of the company or if the decision makers do not believe that customers are at the core of the very success of the business. Lucky us, lucky you. It's very, very, very likely that your CEO or your head of business, head of customer experience, head of marketing do believe that customers are important for the success of the organizations, or at least if they look at the balance sheet, they will figure that pretty quickly. But then once this is said, I think there's a major difference between some companies, like there's a huge diversity between companies which are so-called customer-centric and one that are very customer-centric, that are really customer-centric, which I think the most extreme one, which is very famous for this, is Amazon, which they've been they communicated a lot about this one, the fact that there is always a seat for the customer. And then there are some other companies which are so-called customer-centric, but are not, in the actions, when you look at it from the inside, it's not that true. And I think that's what makes this talk today very interesting, Carlos, is, the difference between what you say and what you do. And at the end of the day, it's at the front line, it's at the operational level that you feel, that you see if company is very customer-centric or not.
And now you mentioned a number of leaders previously there. I'd like to focus on that starting off. So, CEOs, senior management, what sort of role do they play in setting the tone for CX transformation?
A couple of them. First one, which is the cheap one, because the values, setting the customer values. I mean, it's cheap. It's not cheap, but my point is it doesn't cost that much to change a company's value. I mean, of course, if you're 100,000 more employees, yeah, that's pretty expensive to change the values on every single piece of document that you have. But at the end of the day, starting by the company's vision, the company's mission, and then the company's values, and making sure that from the top of the company, from the very top, the idea of customer centricity is embedded into the company values. I think that's one that's a very concrete one. And then there's a second one, which is about the budgets, making sure that you have a CX department and the CX department or CX initiatives, and they have the budgets. Because again, this is your job at the end of the day when you're at the very top to choose where are the resources focused, right? And you can choose whether you're going to put some budget on CX initiatives and then the level of these budgets.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of depends on scale as well, because, there is the opportunity as well for the CEOs to personally engage in client calls themselves, and that's a really nice way of, even at a higher level, when you're a larger organization, that's a nice way of keeping in touch. And, we do that with our own engineers and try and get them involved in client calls as well. And a lot of other companies do, because they find that having the on the ground roles kind of understood better helps to drive the customer centricity, as you say.
So that first, top of the pyramid kind of mindset, this is the company's value. Then making sure we have the right budget, and then showing and leading with example is definitely key, because again, it means that these values, they're just not empty words, but they are actual operational statements that you are going to invest time. And if your company says it's customer centric, but your CEO doesn't take customer calls, there's a gap. And it's very interesting because there's also the so-called experience gap as well, which has been very popularized for the last more than 10 years now, which is basically this idea to say every CEO or C-suite think they have a very, very good customer experience. They believe that they have, the best 9 out of 10 in terms of customer experience. But when you ask what happened on the ground, like there is a huge delta between like what they think and what actually really happened on the front. And that's where, again, being on the front, leading by example, putting the right budgets, but also another one that we haven't discussed yet, Carlos, is that idea of also creating initiatives which are not just for a specific department, but which are across departments. So you can have, like, as you've just mentioned, like you can have your engineers that sometimes, they jump in a customer call and they can put themselves into the customer shoes. And that goes with customer centricity because like you give them the customer experience that they might not have on a daily basis if they are not in front of a customer every single day.
Talk me through that kind of mindset. So something that I have told you in the past and you're very well aware of is HubSpot's policy of the customer, and then you have the company and you have the team, then you have the individual, and they base their whole kind of, all their values are around that idea of the client comes first, and you kind of drop everything and it kind of trickles down in that way. Talk me through kind of how organizations can effectively measure the level of customer centricity that they have. It'd be really interesting to understand that point of view.
Yeah. So getting back to the, like, I think most of our listeners already know these KPIs. They're going to be like NPS, is Net Promoter Score, which goes beyond the customer satisfaction score, so CSAT, because it takes into account that you're not only satisfied, but you're going to talk about it. You're going to recommend it to whether that's a friend or family. So NPS is still a big one. And again, we've talked a lot about it in this show in the previous episodes. And I'm pretty sure we'll have more on the NPS in the future, because we believe that NPS is still very much a very interesting, important KPI. And you can predict a company's valuation based on their NPS. And just this idea for any CEO, any head of customer experience, head of marketing, head of sales, like if you if you dig there and you understand that taking care of your customer experience is more important and can yield better result than, again, cost of acquisition, like that's pretty expensive. You can keep your current customer, making sure they're retained and they still buy your product and services. Well, for sure, that's a big change in terms of business and a big improvement. And so to go back to your question, Carlos, in terms of KPIs, so you got the NPS, which I would say is still the main one and probably going to be the main one for the next couple of years, which has a couple of other KPIs, which are related, CSAT, CES. But then I think one that we like a lot, which come from the software industry, but is, as our, like most industries are also transforming, evolving, is the NRR, the net retention rate, which is basically saying like, okay, I had X customers 2 years ago, like basically the amount that they were spending 2 years ago, 2 years down the line or 1 year later, has it grown from 100% to 120%, or do we have some customers that left and then I have some issues to retain these customers? And I think it's very easy to calculate for us as a SaaS editor, so building software, because we have our customers on a revenue basis, which is based on subscription. But for some less software company, like less technological companies, they will get there at some point. These metrics is just influenced by customer experience at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I find it a really interesting metric as well, because obviously you have churn as the classic one that companies use, not just CS and CX teams. But what's really nice about NR is you're building on that almost. So you're using not just the fact that the client has left, but also the idea that maybe they're downgrading their plan. And that's a really interesting thing to measure as well.
Yeah, and in most businesses and most industries are turning into that kind of business model one way or another. Like you can look at Amazon Prime, you can look at, Netflix is a very classical example, but again, your phone carrier, you have like hundreds of examples. Look at how you spend money as a consumer. Like a lot of it is subscription, right? Or is somehow subscription based. Even like your supermarket, like there is that idea of retention. It's just they don't track the net retention rate, but you have that idea of, okay, how much did I spend like 2 weeks ago? How much am I going to spend like in 2 weeks? Is that expanded? Is that like that decreased? And one of the key driver, if not the most important key driver, is customer experience as a whole.
To go back into the idea of customer mindset, more the company level, it'd be great to understand when we talked about this earlier, the role of the employee. What sort of best practices would you suggest for engaging employees at all levels in order to embrace this kind of customer focused mindset?
Yeah, so there is a lot to do. There's one that is very much based on ritual, which is basically having a weekly review of customer feedback. It doesn't cost much. Just set a weekly meeting based on the different teams to just review, read key reports that are going to show the customer needs, the customer pain points. So that's the first one, reviewing this, the customer feedback. Then making sure that the customer journey, and journeys with an S, they are mapped. And like everyone know, like, okay, how does the customer enters in business with us? Where is the exit points? And where are the tricky moments in their journey? So whether it's onboarding, whether it's subscribing to something, there are always key moments. And if you are in the tech side, but you don't understand the key element of the customer journey, well, again, it's very hard to make like customer-centric decision if you don't understand the customer journey. So there's that idea of like understanding the customer journey as a whole, making sure you have real example and the feedback review sessions, and then having workshops. They really put the organization into a more and more customer-focused mindset.
I think what's really useful about something like a workshop as well is the fact that you are able to include employees that might not have that daily contact with a customer, and suddenly you can see like a light bulb switch.
Yeah.
They feel that connection when you're having those conversations together. Take, for example, the engineering team again. Just because they're classically a team that are focused on the sprint, getting things delivered. And suddenly when you can put in perspective, so this bug that I'm working on has actually been an issue for 4 different customers, and I can read the feedback and see how much of an impact it has on people's daily use.
And getting back to our last episode, it's very important to have a global view as well, because because what that implies as well is making sure that you have prioritization. So you don't listen to just one source of feedback at what moment of the customer journey, but you have a very 360-degree view of every single piece of feedback, whether it comes from tickets, whether it comes from social networks, whether it comes from survey data, whether it comes from online reviews. But you don't review, like just one piece of the journey, but you get access to the whole thing. And that's where, like, more on the technical side, like making sure you have a voice of customer system in place, which is kind of the step one. And then the second step, which is more like customer intelligence. How do you make sure you connect your voice of customer system with your business data, so you can actually have results, but at least making sure that the voice of customer is not lost, but it's centralized. It's a very not easy to set up for everyone. There is an investment, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, and I think that leads us nicely into our second strategy. So strategy 2 is about empowering teams. How can we increase that level of ownership amongst the teams? So the first area that I wanted to discuss was about tools. For me, tools can be kind of hard to identify how to improve, because a lot of the time, operational teams, like the CX department, they have their head down, and it's really hard to get this strategic step back. So maybe if you could talk me through the kind of usage there.
Yeah, so there are a couple of challenges. So one challenge that we've just discussed is making sure you have a 360-degree view, because otherwise you're taking the decision that doesn't have all the insights or all the
the biggest impact.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can be taking a decision based on the data that you have, but if you don't have the whole data, like you might take decision on things which are not that important, and you might miss some of the key points. So I would say that's one. Then there's a second one, which is also like making sure that it's in the context. Let's take a retail use case. Like if you're in a store, and if you look at just like customer experience dashboard, which just give you your NPS for your store, or that just give you the welcome score out of 5, great, but it's not that actionable until you can compare it, until you can have like good practices, until you can have like actual actionable intelligence. Until you have this, like tracking KPIs isn't really the answer. Like it's a start. It's not a good start, it's a start, but it's definitely not the final solution. So you want to make sure that you have the right insights and the right intelligence or level of intelligence into your system, so that it's clearly actionable for someone that just want to get like good business results. And so the challenge is, how do you correlate both?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the same goes for training as well. So you have 2 forms of training methods. You have the continuous learning, you have more of the scenario based. But the most important thing, as you mentioned, is identifying the biggest needs, finding what's the biggest impact, and then seeing how you can get the most out of it, essentially.
And also like correlating this with your success, like making sure that when we take a step back in terms of, like making customer centricity, like you have to correlate like personal impact or team impact with, at the end of the day, what you get paid. So compensation has to be tied, and then making sure that your skill sets when you're being trained. Again, it includes a training on the customer journey. It includes a training on how do I understand my customers. It includes training about like how can I take action? And then next question is, okay, but if I take action, what is the benefit for me? What is the benefit for my team?
Yeah,
And that's where
what's the
Yeah,
kind
go
of
for it.
impact that compensation has with customer success, customer experience success?
So there's two kind of impact. There's the first one that is a good impact, and then there's that. Good impact is basically making sure that you have people which are compensated well for dealing with the customers in a way that it's correlated with NPS success, with basically good customer experience, going the extra mile, like taking, making sure there's plenty of, in many industries, there are plenty of examples of like, so for example, some hotels that have a huge budget to solve a customer pain points for little things that are going to make the customer like feel not just well, but feel like, oh, this company is amazing. And again, I think we all have the Apple opening. When you open an Apple product, like the customer experience is just amazing. You just open the laptop, just switch on, enter your password, you back your data, you're ready to go. Or then another example would be when you go to Starbucks, they call you by your name. Like these little things which are very, very important at the end of the day to make this customer experience really remarkable and not just great. So I think that's one, and that's kind of like the good customer experience. And then there's I would say the bad impact of compensation on customer experience is when it is designed in a way that you can game the system or like bend the rules. Like we already gave that example on the show, but having someone that's going to set up your internet connection at your home and then ask you to leave a 9 out of 10 at an NPS question to enable the connection. That this example is always a very good one to explain that if the rules are not set up correctly, meaning if you are just getting paid because your customers reply 9 or 10, like that just doesn't work, because then people are going to game the system. And that's why like team benefits or team compensation based on customer experience is way more powerful than the personal one. And one very good example of that is like Apple do that at the store level. They correlate the bonus at the end based on the store experience, not just one's experience,
So we've talked about empowering teams. We've talked about compensating them, but we've only really briefly talked about the training aspects when it comes to leadership playing a role in fostering this continuous development. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about the types of strategies that can be evolved to make sure the teams are leveled up to understand how to be customer-centric.
Yeah, so I'd say there's three ones which are very interesting and fairly easy to set up. The first one is going to be like mentoring. So making sure that there is someone that has the customer vision, or the customer, like basically being part of a customer experience initiative that is very close to you. And again, it doesn't have to be your boss. It doesn't have to be, but basically the voice of the customer is never far away. And having someone that can, again, like be here when you need to, understanding, okay, what's working in the customer journey, what's not working. And that can make sure that at the end of the day, the individual feel empowered by the customer knowledge, the customer intelligence. And again, that has an impact. If they improve it, like they actually are rewarded for that. Then the second one is going to be like certifications. So basically making sure that there is a way to reward and to certify that some people in the companies are CX leaders. And they don't have to have the CX job title, but you can be in a store. And if you have like 10 customers that mention you every single month, well, then you're certified like top customer experience employee of the month. So that actually rewards people, and that actually certify people that, okay, these guys in the company, they represent the voice of the customer and they understand the importance of customer experience, and therefore they need to be treated differently.
Yeah, I think one really nice example from a client that I'm sure they wouldn't mind us mentioning is the fact that they have lots of employees that work across the board, across the country, and their names get mentioned. What's really nice is they can be on Google reviews and they can have that person's name be mentioned. And then after the end of the month or after the end of the year, they collate all of the names that have been added, and they have a top, 5, top 10 people to praise, and that's a really nice thing to reward the employee at the end of the month or year. It gives a lot of like self-recognition as well. It's just it's a nice little initiative that I like.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, it gives power back to the individual, being like, yeah, I do matter to the organization because thanks to me, like X customer last year were actually, they were very satisfied and they felt like the company's mission was actually something that was not just a good sentence, but something that actually happened. And then the third one, Carlos, I think is going to be like refresher courses. So making sure that there's not like one CX training, here's a customer journey, but making sure that, again, transformation heroes is about like transformation. So everything transforms. So your customer experience is going to transform itself with your help, hopefully. But at the end of the day, good customer experience today is very different from 4 years ago. And in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's also going to be very different. So you want to make sure that it's not a one-time event, but making sure that every single individual in the company, they are aware of the customer pain points, how to access that information, and what is their role into this.
Yeah, great. Okay, strategy 3. Strategy 3 is all about leveraging AI for impactful decisions. So obviously we've talked about this a lot. We're going to continue to talk about it, but the AI revolution that we're seeing at the moment has allowed operational teams in particular to find another way of doing business more efficiently. So it'd be great to touch on that. And my first question to you is, how do you believe that AI can empower the CX transformation? So what sort of examples do you have at the top of your head?
Well, I think there's a lot of, before getting into examples, like I think when it comes to, again, operational people, you have a limited amount of time. And the real power in our industry, the customer experience industry, the real power of AI, at the end of the day, it's all about time. It's, you have limited amount of time. Okay, what can you do with that time? And the current state of AI is very, very powerful to save you time. Save you time at building surveys, detecting what's working, what's not working, correlating information, like to identify pain points very precisely, which would take someone like hours and hours to go into the CRM to make sure that you can link the pain point with a profile, and then you would have to do some exports. AI cannot actually make the change for you. You cannot go to the store and be like, we need to change that product position because it's not clear. However, AI can save you lots of time into detecting like what's broken. And so the way we see it and the way we push it is basically saying like, AI will give you the power of like hundreds of consultants, like basically doing that job for you and making sure that if you are 2 or 3 CX leaders, like you can have the power of 100 people that can drive massive impact everywhere. And so from an operational, like what it's just going to do is save you a lot of time. Saving time into doing manual, but also saving time into detecting what's broken.
Yeah, and I love that. And one of the simple things that we use, I find so effective, that is consultant level, in my opinion, is like transcripting meetings.
Yeah.
So having a little bot that just sits in the corner and then at the end of the meeting gives you really detailed notes with headings, with actions, with mentioning the individuals in the call. That is sublime.
Yeah, imagine the amount of time that is currently being saved. And that's one example. But yeah, and for CX, at the end of the day, you're going to have like, again, detecting pain points. It's very manual. It's a very concrete example that, again, reading feedback, it's good. But if you have like 1,000 of them to read every week, it's pretty boring. And also it's pretty, like you get pretty bad at it over time. Also building action plan, like generating action plan. Again, like generating one action plan, very fun. Generating one action plan per store per week, pretty complex. And then there are other ones, which I think are also very covered, but we can mention them today, taking care of low-level customer support interactions. Like, hey, I don't find my account number. They are a little bit out of our scope, but still part of the customer experience and a very good use case, which is currently in production. It's probably the most deployed use case with AI and CX at the moment.
Especially at B2C level.
Yeah, exactly. Especially at B2C level. But still, like that's very concrete. It's, like you said, you have a lot of value out of this use cases, and there are going to be like more and more and more and more use cases like this in the future.
Yeah, I would like to pivot slightly because we talked about the note-taking abilities, the ability to manage large amounts of data using AI. I'd love to understand a little bit about the concrete actions that we can take to operational teams using the AI technology we have.
Yeah. So again, going back to the time being saved, like concrete actions, when you workplace interactions. Like this is concrete, but again, this is a little bit out of the scope. But if we take customer experience as a whole, so basically understanding the customer journey, making sure we can improve the customer journey, and making sure that these improvements are correlated with business results, like where AI can help is saving a lot of time into detecting what's working, what's not working, and then generating some of the actions. Like this is very concrete. Like basically, if you take like 1,000 negative feedback, like you have lots of improvements in there. Because again, like us human beings, when we leave a feedback to a company, like we give a lot of insight. Like we give some text, we say exactly like, hey, this was broken, and then it's pretty straightforward for an AI if there is the right context, meaning the business data. If the pain point is not like from 2 years ago, but it's from like 2 weeks ago, it's from yesterday, then it's pretty straightforward to come up with some very good actions, some very good improvements. And so where AI can help is saving the time that it's needed to actually come up with actual solutions. Like, again, taking the whole cycle of listening, enriching, detecting what's not working, making sure I have an action plan, and then making sure that action plan gets reported correctly.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like you read my mind because the next thing I want to talk about is what sort of metrics we can use, what sort of specifically AI-driven metrics we can use to empower operation teams. Because
and to make sure that again, like it's not a false prophecy, that it's not like wasting money, but it's actually adding value, solving real problem. It's a clear business and a clear competitive advantage. So I think there's like 3 kind of KPIs, because there's the technical one, which we can get started, which is the accuracy. So basically, okay, well, you make me a recommendation, you write me a customer reply. How accurate is it from 1 to 100, like as a percentage? And then there is the time saved KPI, like which basically, okay, I have 40 hours or I have 50 hours per week. Okay, how much does AI help me save not on a wish, like not on a being an idea of like, that's what I wish it would do for me, but like, okay, I saved this week. So for example, if we go back to the nuts AI bots, it's very simple to measure that, because like, at least on my side, I was spending like at least 2 hours per week just writing notes based on the different meetings, whether that's with advisors like investors or employees. And again, save that time. And then there's a third one, which is probably the most important one, which is like business impact. Okay, you've detected 10 improvements. What are the actual business results? So again, could be churn avoided, could be new customers added. But like when you make this final connection with business results, like that's where you can have a loop, an improvement loop that goes faster and faster and faster, because again, like you want your business to grow, and you can correlate clear improvements that empowers like people on the ground, making sure that there's a direct relationship between what they are doing on the ground and business results for the company.
Great. Well, I'd love to summarize, because we've gone through a lot of different topics within our 3 strategies. So just to recap again, we have 3 key strategies. The first one is cultivating a customer-first culture. Then we have about empowering teams, and finally, leveraging the AI. So if we were to start from the start, it's really important, obviously, from every level to have teams, CEO, senior management, the whole company really involved in having a customer-centric view. And this can be supported by having training sessions. It can be supported by including customer feedback within the teams, which is a really important basis. And then from that, when you have new hires, when you're doing onboarding, those individuals also get brought into the same culture. From that, we then have the ability to empower teams through compensation, through continuous development, through training sessions. And then we go into the idea of using now the information we have in order to leverage that through AI. So what's really nice about that is we have the ability to track on the ground measurements. And then from using that, we can say, okay, well, now we need key metrics. So now we can measure not only just the NPS, but we're also measuring NRR, net retention revenue. We're able to measure the accuracy of the results we're getting, the time saved, and then most importantly, the business impact that we have. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think that's a very good summary, Cost.
Well, François, thank you. I'm sorry if you're hearing a baby crying in the background.
No problem, Carlo. That's part of remote working. Yeah.
Exactly. It's food time. It's food time somewhere. Thank you again for your time and see you in the next one.
Yeah. Thank you, Carlos. Bye bye.
Bye.